Hello everyone. So this video is a little different. It's Michael Anfield here and thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it around with all your friends and family, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click that little bell icon if you want to receive notifications in your email. And don't forget to subscribe to my email newsletter and get my books as well through Amazon and my website, weareinterconnected.com. Okay, so today's video is on childbearing, adoption, and contraceptives like vasectomies, tubal ligation, pill, condoms, etc., etc. So I think I did at least a video on this in the past, but I have very, I shouldn't say very, but I have a bit of a different view now talking to many people on this issue of childbearing. And so let's get into this today because I think it's very important that we understand these ideas. Okay, so many years ago, once I or first time I've seen, or first few times I've seen documentary films, I saw children suffering, children not, dying in their parents' arms, not having enough to food, and also not getting enough medical care. And so I thought to myself, it would be selfish of me to bear children when there are so many unfortunate children out there that just don't have a good home and a good life. And so for me, I would have liked to maybe adopt in the future if needed. So I thought to myself, yeah, this is a great thing to, adoption. And for sure, I did not want to have children, especially in the immediate future. And so eventually, many years ago, I'm not sure when it was, but somewhere between 2012 and 2014, I believe, I had a vasectomy. And vasectomy is a sterilization that is 99 point, I can't remember the stats, but it's like 99 point something percent, uh, child proof. So basically, it stops the man from getting the woman pregnant. And so when you're having intercourse, vasectomy stops that, or at least for 99 point whatever it is percentage of that time. The opposite of that for women is called tubal ligation, and that's similar to a vasectomy for women. Of course, there's a little less, more chance actually for women to get pregnant, and it's not guaranteed to actually work. So for women, you might need a few procedures before it's successful. Now, there's also other contraceptive methods such as the pill, um, and condoms, and also other contraceptive methods that are less known. Okay, so childbearing is a very, again, childbearing, adoption, and contraceptives are very tricky things to get into. It's very controversial. It's just like saying to someone, okay, um, get you have a child and you don't want the child, so let's get an abortion. And that's another thing that's really controversial now. And people say, well, yes, getting um, that is your choice. A woman's body is their choice, right? But then at the same time, are you killing life or not? And during certain period of time, the child is literally formed within the womb of the woman. And so, is it right or not to be doing this? And I don't have really any varying opinion because there's so much uh, I can get into when talking about this. But this video is really about childbearing and contraceptions or contraceptives. And let's get into that now. So, in the early days, I thought, yeah, you know, having children is kind of selfish because there's so many children out there that don't have a home. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's just like the equivalent of non-human animals. So would you want to breed dogs or cats? Or would you rather adopt or rescue? That's the thing. And that I thought was similar in the sense of bearing children. Now, the whole idea is that there's so many animals out there, so many companion animals, and so we spay and neuter and we adopt, right? And for humans, it's kind of the same. There's overpopulation, and we have this notion that because of overpopulation, we need to sterilize ourselves. We need to get some kind of vasectomy or tubal ligation, or at least use a temporary method of condoms or the pill and do it that way. So, is that a solution? Do we really have a high population or overpopulation of people? Can our world accept more people? Can it accept 9 billion? Can it accept 12 billion? Can it accept 15 billion? And that's the question. Can we accept many more people? And this whole thing about overpopulation and bearing children, is this the truth or not? Like, well, I'm now that I'm thinking about it, it's very, and I've been thinking about it for the last many years and talking to people, a lot of people, I've actually changed my view on this. Now, this video is going to be very lengthy because there's so much to get into here. So please bear with me and watch this video until the end. Okay. So we need to realize that most food on this earth are given to farmed animals. Now, I'm not saying about free range animals like cows, grass fed cows, or grass fed, actually, they're really called grass fed cattle. Um, but majority of the animals on the earth are actually fed grains. They're fed grains, they're fed legumes like soy, beans, they're fed alfalfa, they're fed all kinds of plant foods that literally could be fed to humans, starving humans. So technically, if we were actually vegan, or majority of people on the earth were vegan, then more of the people, at least at least a billion people could be fed in this world. That's the statistics. At least a billion people could, additional a billion people could be fed if majority of the people, actually if the majority of people went vegan, there's different stats and different people say different things, but they say if the world went vegan, like tomorrow basically, we could technically feed between 8 and 12 billion people. I've even heard numbers as high as 15 billion. So I don't know where people are getting these numbers. I mean, I know Will Tuttle is sometimes saying 9 billion. Sometimes he says 10 billion. Sometimes he says 15 billion. So I don't know where people are getting these numbers. But the consensus has it that between 8 and 12 billion, maybe as high as 15 billion, people can be fed if the majority of people on the earth go vegan. And I mean at least 70 or 80% of the people. So, meaning that we could technically feed the entire world. Okay? Because what's happening is in areas where people are starving, they're actually growing enough food in those areas to feed to livestock, to feed to farmed animals. And so if we if we stop animal agriculture, first of all, and we rejuvenate those areas, we put nutrients back into the soil by way of composting our plant scraps and also using our human manure and urine, we could literally transform those areas into gardens and orchards to feed food to people instead of feeding it the food to animals, non-human animals. So in that case, we could literally take care of the overpopulation. But because our world is totally upside down and we are feeding majority of the food to farmed animals, and there's so many, again, so many statistics and percentages of about how much percentage of the food is fed to livestock worldwide. The estimates have it around 40% of the world's food, uh, food, the growing of food is fed to animals, non-human animals for food, cows, pigs, chickens, fish, etc. So this is the first thing that we need to realize. The second thing we need to realize is that our is our world really overpopulated with humans? Is 7 billion people really a lot of people? And 7 billion people, or however many people we have on the earth. I even question that number. Some people say 7.5 now, some people say close to 8 billion, some people say less than 7, some people say even close to 9 billion. So there's so many numbers out there. How did we come to this magic number of around 7.5 billion? Well, probably from, and I'm not sure where the numbers come from, but I know the numbers most likely come from some type of governmental organization. They basically take all the stats from individual countries of how many people live there. So basically, it starts from the local scale. So basically, the local scale, there's what's the name of this? Basically, it's like a survey that people do at home. How many people live in the household? You also have the your ID numbers or social insurance numbers, as it's called in Canada. Everybody has their own ID, so they're basically under the government. They have their own government ID if they are registered under the system, under the capitalist or communist system. You have some kind of ID number, and that's how you really track how many people are living here in the world. Now, there are also other people that are not part of society, like indigenous people, people that care not to be part of society, just live out in nature and don't live in cities, don't even go to cities. They live out in nature, they grow their own food, etc., etc. So we really don't know how many people are actually living on this earth. Now, I would say, and I don't even know if it's a billion or if it's 10 billion or if it's really like 7.5 billion people. But let's just say it is, give a round number of 8 billion people living on the earth. Okay? That way we're counting for people that are not registered by society or governments. Okay? So that don't have an actual birth certificate. Okay. So we have 8 billion people on the earth. Now, according to most people, you can feed the food that we're growing right now in the world, if we're not feeding the food to farmed animals, if everybody goes vegan, which it won't happen overnight, but if everybody would go vegan, let's say overnight, we would be able to feed between 10 and 12 billion people. Um, the farmers would be able to feed themselves. The families and individual people would be able to feed themselves because they would be growing their own food, okay, especially in rural areas. Now, in cities, it's a little different, and then we have corporations that take care of most of the food in supermarkets and so forth. But let's just say um, we bypass that, and most of us buy from local farmers markets or we grow our own food, okay? So what that means is that majority of people are saying that we can feed between 10 and 12 billion people. Now by 2050, estimates have it that we're going to have about 9 billion people on the earth living. Now, if you count all the people that are not registered through governments, don't have an actual birth certificate, then that number could be probably 10 billion or maybe even 11 billion. Okay? Now, we can still, if we're all vegans or majority of us are vegans, we can still feed the entire world. according to that, because we can feed between 10 and 12 billion. And even then, I'm saying that with the food that we're growing now to feed to livestock, to feed to farmed animals, we could feed to humans. Okay, so that being said, um, we can also grow additional food. Everybody can also grow their own additional food, thus being more self-sustainable and actually being able to feed even more people. So we'll have extra food for wildlife, free roaming animals in nature, and that way no one would go hungry. And actually, it's best that we grow as much food as we possibly can. So, having said that, we don't live in an overpopulated world. Okay. Now, the only reason why people say we live in an overpopulated world is because of the fact that there's so many people that are harming this earth and that are contributing to negative ills on this earth. And because so, they think, oh, it's overpopulated because of all these bad things that people are doing. So if we reduce the number of people, let's say from 7.5 billion to 4 billion, then there's going to be less pollution, less destruction, less consumption, etc., etc. But that's not the way to think about it. We have to think about it as, let's, instead of reducing the population, let's get people to think differently. Let's get people to think better about not overbuying, not being consumers and materialistic uh, human beings, but instead being stewards to the earth and not destroying the earth. So that's what we need to do. We need to get people to actually stop, for the majority part of it, stop buying things that we absolutely don't need, and also to stop producing so much waste. That's another thing. So, for example, all the plastic that we have in the world and all the, not just plastic, but all the other materials that we have that we're producing for products, we should be producing alternatives that are eco-friendly. So, for example, we buy pasta in the store and we have packaging on that pasta, and we have plastic packaging that usually people say, okay, let's recycle that. But a lot of plastics cannot be recycled. For example, in the US, I've heard many stats around, but in the US, between 5 and 20% of, and then there's of course different stats, but between 5 and 20% of the plastic that comes in that people recycle do not get recycled. Absolutely do not get recycled. So between 95, okay, so between 80 and 95% of the plastic that is recycled gets thrown into the landfill or into the oceans, or I mean, eventually goes into the oceans. So it's definitely not sustainable. Now, in this day and age where there's so many biodegradable materials that can be made into plastic, we need to understand that there's alternatives. But people and companies and corporations just want to continue with their old way of thinking, continuing with creating plastics that are harmful to the earth and to each other and to all the naturally free roaming animals in nature. Because don't forget, when people have cut up in the past, uh, for example, birds or whale stomachs, you can see that there's tons and tons and tons of plastic. Like, also an example, the cattle that are, or cows, because almost all of them are female, the cows that are roaming in the streets in India, for example, the organizations have taken these animals, cut their stomachs open, and removed literally like pounds and pounds of garbage and plastics from their stomachs. And it's unfortunate. I mean, there's plastics and garbage everywhere. There's landfills everywhere. And nowadays we can convert. There's so much technology out there. Of course, corporations and governments don't want these to exist. Basically, there's a lot of technology out there that will convert, and I've seen in Japan in many different areas, I've seen people converting garbage, plastics, all sorts of garbage into different materials. Okay, like reusing them, converting them uh, into gas, all kinds of stuff. Like gas for cars. So that's the thing. So ultimately, we don't have an overpopulation issue. Now, let's take another example. So let's say we absolutely did not grow up in society. We did not grow up in cities. We did not grow up in any societies. We don't have a birth certificate. We live like Aborigine people in nature, and we have no idea about these things, these cities and these birth certificates and government and corporations and police and anything like that. So we're just minding our own business and we're living in nature just how we did for tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. And so we don't have this concept of overpopulation. We don't have this concept of there's so many people in the world. We just live our lives as lightly as we possibly can with the lightest environmental footprint, and we would maybe consume animals if necessary, if absolutely necessary, if we were starving or something. But for the majority part of it, probably 98 or more percent of our food would be plant-based. Certain areas, it would probably be easier to be closer to 100% plant-based. So absolutely no animal products at all. Now again, only because of sustenance would we need to consume animal products. Okay? So if we did not understand this concept of overpopulation, we would naturally give birth because there would be no contraceptives, there would be no way to have a vasectomy or tubal ligation, there would be no such thing as condoms or the pill or any kind of, I don't know what they call them, like those other contraceptives anyways. There's like a few of them out there. But there would be no understanding of this because we would be living in nature. We would be producing virtually no waste material. Everything that we would use, we would reuse. Okay? And so there would be no understanding and no idea of this adoption of children or this contraceptives or anything like that. And so the whole idea is that we would give birth just normally, like women give birth, and in a normal way. It wouldn't be lying down on a bed. It wouldn't be any of these nonsense, putting children in strollers and that kind of stuff, because these things don't exist in nature. Okay, strollers and beds, like a bed and women lying on their backs while giving birth, they don't exist. That's all part of the fake society that we live in, the man-made civilization that we live in, and the Aborigines have no understanding of that. Now, because we've taken over a lot of the naturally free land around, we've actually gone into a lot of Aborigines or native people's homes. And so now they have more understanding. There's not many people out there now that are truly living naturally free lives in nature because governments and police, they want to intervene and they want to take our freedoms away and that sort of thing. So, that being said, they would have no comprehension of any kind of adoption or contraceptives or anything like that. That being said, we would give birth to as many children as we can. And we would also wouldn't have any understanding of the Bible or any holy books. because books would not exist in that kind of world. Writing would not exist in that kind of world. Maybe writing to a certain degree, but it wouldn't exist pertaining to like books or things like that. And so we would not have any understanding or any knowledge of external gods or external um, information. Okay, maybe external gods, but not external information, as in books, internet, things like that. So where do we get our news and our understanding and the truth from? From within ourselves. All the truth, all the information, all the values we get through ourselves, within ourselves. Like all the love, all the values that we have within the community, all the understanding, all that kind of stuff is gotten from within, from our intuition, cultivating our intuition, also through nature. So what that actually means is that we wouldn't have any comprehension or any understanding of what it says in the Bible because we wouldn't read it. We would just be part of nature. We would just, live harmoniously within nature. So the whole understanding is that we do not have an overpopulation of humans. Rather, we have an overpopulation of non-human animals or farmed animals. And another thing is that we do not have this understanding, any kind of understanding of adoption or contraceptives or anything like that. So we would, I don't know how frequently it would be, I don't know how many kids they would have, but definitely they would have at least one or two children, and they would bear one or two children. And so the idea of vasectomies is, or any contraceptives or any adoption, uh, is not a natural thing. Now, unfortunately, we don't live, people, of course, majority of people that are watching this or listening to this, we don't live in that kind of world. I don't think anyone that's listening to this lives in that kind of world out in nature. We don't live with no understanding of adoption and vasectomies and tubal ligations and contraceptives. You know, we don't have, we have an understanding because we see, or we have this understanding that there is an overpopulation, but there isn't actually. Now, there may be other reasons that people have a reason not to have children. That's just because they don't want to have children. That's because maybe they have um, their career or their purpose that they need to fulfill, and they just don't have time to have children. Maybe they don't have enough money to bear children, and that's another thing that I want to talk about is the money problems that people have with children. Now, the problem why we have money issues when we have children is, now I thought about that too, like, oh, I'm not earning enough money to afford a child. And first of all, I was thinking lack. Okay, so I was thinking lack and not abundance. That's number one. And secondly, we need to realize that if we are fully self-sustainable, what money do we really need? If we're growing all our fruits and vegetables and we have a house, what money do we really need if we're living in nature? If we're a tribe living in nature, I mean, tribes don't have money. There's no concept of money. Money is a concept of our society. The monetary system is a concept of our society. It's a concept with governmental hierarchy and corporations and all these elite people that are running the banks and all that kind of system. It has nothing to do with these tribal people that are living in nature. So them worrying about money is non-existent because there is no money in their system, in their communities. So worrying about money in this system that we're living in currently is because we're not fully self-sustainable. So that's the thing, we're not fully self-sustainable, meaning that we still rely on water, electricity, and food from the supermarket or the local organic markets for all our all our stuff. So we rely on all of it. Now, the child is definitely going to need to get clothed. They're definitely going to need to have food, all that kind of stuff. So at around the age of 2.5, 3 years old, give or take, maybe a few years, the child would have to be fed solid food. Okay. In the beginning, maybe there'll be some smoothies, or maybe there'll be some, juices, things like that. In the beginning, of course, the mother will breastfeed her child or children, and yeah, but the child will still need to be some way clothed or things like that. Now, in nature, it's not going to be like that because a lot of people that live in nature, especially in the tropical, subtropical regions, most likely don't need clothes and they don't wear clothes, very minimal clothing. Okay, so they don't need, and they also make their own clothing too, if they do, because they live out in nature. They don't go to the store to buy their, clothing or food or anything like that. But we do here, unfortunately. We also pay for other things like car payments, rent, internet, all sorts of other things. And that's, of course, why we need money. Now, when we're transitioning away from the society, that's a different story. Less and less, we're going to need less and less money as time goes on. So it's natural to actually be living in a system like they did thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, living in small knit communities out in nature and not having a single worry in the world, just living their lives and trying to understand the universal force, some kind of energy force, and just living their lives as harmoniously and compassionately as they possibly can. But we don't live that way. And that's why we worry if we give birth, we're not going to have enough money to support that child or those children. And that's the problem here today because none of us or majority of us are not fully self-sustainable. And even if we do grow some of our food, which is better than nothing, we are still not fully self-sustainable. So we still need a source of income in some way. And unfortunately, that's the way I am currently as of July 2020. But my aim is to be more self-sustainable as time goes on, creating a veganic homesteading community. So that's what I really wanted to talk about today. So realize that these people in nature, they ultimately don't have any understanding of all of these things that I'm talking about today, like contraceptives and adoption and all that. They just naturally give childbirth. They bear children. Uh, they see it as a sacred kind of life, sacred thing that we do in life, and that is the beautiful thing. And yeah, so just living our lives naturally, trying to live in harmony with the world, natural world around us and each other, and with the free roaming animals that we share this earth with, and to realize that everything in our society that we're living in with this hierarchy system, governments, all kinds of stuff, is all fake. It's all just yeah, it's all like we're given this information. We're given the information, all the information. We're not cultivating and trusting our intuition. We're not getting the information from nature. We're just trusting whatever we hear from governments and government organizations and corporations and mainstream media and so forth. And we're not really in tune with our nature, with our innate natural wisdom and compassion. And so there's a lot to learn. And I have, again, a really different view on this. So I say, whatever you feel is right for you, if you want to give birth or not, it's all up to you. But to remember that once we start to understand these ideas and start to go slowly, living more in nature or with nature and walking away slowly from our system, then we start to understand that, hey, let's just listen to our hearts. Let's just listen to our gut instinct, our intuition, and let's not listen to all this media, governments, mainstream media, mega corporations, all that kind of stuff, the mass media, everything. Let's just understand that this system doesn't work anymore. It's not beneficial, and we're here to learn to work together to create this alternative system, which is basically a veganic homesteading community. So veganic meaning that we don't use animals at all, okay, for anything, for gardening, for we don't use chemicals. We treat the earth respectfully and harmoniously. We work harmoniously with the natural free roaming earth, you know, and the free roaming animals and with each other. And that's about it. So this video is about almost 40 minutes in length. It's really lengthy, but I really wanted to get into this, into the details. It's very, very difficult to talk about these issues, but I really wanted to talk about it and why I don't necessarily recommend people getting any type of contraceptive or use any kind of contraceptives. Now, one other thing that I want to talk about here, which I just realized now, is the topic of condoms, topic of temporary contraceptives like the pill or condoms or things like that. Now, in our society, we're eating all kinds of unnatural and unhealthy foods. We're living in unnatural environments, in houses, in the cities. We're not living natural lives, okay? And we're not breathing in the best air, and there's a lot of pollution, a lot of destruction to our environment, and we're part of that. We have all this Wi-Fi and radiation going on around us, and we're exposed to all this electronics and radiation, all this kind of stuff, and we're not peaking at our best health. And so we need to realize that all the negative bad things that we're taking in through our skin or through our mouths or through our noses, it's not really doing us, any good. And so we need to realize that now we are getting so many diseases, so many illnesses because of two things, ultimately, because of our environment, and the biggest thing because of what we're eating and what we're putting on our bodies. So we're not eating natural foods. If we're going to the supermarket, we're eating unhealthy, period. Okay? It's unhealthy. Even the fruits and the vegetables, forget it. Okay? Of course, there are certain cases, different, certain exceptions in certain cases. But in the most case, we should be growing our own food veganically, more so closer to nature, so in rural areas. And we should also be temporarily supporting farmers, local farmers markets, and transitioning away to buying from supermarkets as much as we possibly can. So that being said, it's because of that, it's because we're eating unhealthy and we're living in an unnatural environment, that we have to use all these, contraceptive measures. But not only that, it's another reason why our minds are so obsessed about, sex, about, you know, perversion, because pornography, for example, is a perversion. It's a perversion. It's nasty. It's sick. It's disgusting. No one needs it. It's literally is degrades our um, our um, natural way of living. It degrades our intuition. It suppresses our innate feelings. It breaks up relationships. It breaks up marriages. It breaks up everything. It's a extremely disgusting industry. And because of that, and because of what we are, because of all our materialism and consumerism and all the unhealthy foods that we're consuming, we actually are resorting to unhealthy sexual behaviors. First of all, we're um, exercising more sex or more sexual, um, what's the word? More sexual It's basically we are becoming, our bodies are becoming more sexually active. So we're having more sex with basically just generally just anyone. And that's the problem. We're having too much sex. We're having too much sex with different people. Um, and that's where all these diseases are coming from, or at least one of the ways that we're getting disease and sickness from having sex with too many different types, different people, basically, and so many, and very, very frequently also. So that's another thing. And because of that, we have to use contraceptives because we don't want to give birth to every single person that we are having sexual intercourse with. So the whole idea is really to understand these ideas, to realize that what we're doing now in our society is totally unnatural, living totally unnatural lives. And so we have to use totally unnatural methods to protect ourselves. It's unfortunate that we have to be in isolation and that we have to, wear all these masks and we have to do all these things just to keep ourselves protected because we live in unnatural environments indoors mostly. A lot of us don't go outdoors, and even if we do, we're not eating healthy. We're living in toxic environments where there's a lot of pollution, a lot of unhealthy foods. We're eating all these disgusting junk foods that are laden, completely laden with chemicals and preservatives and processing and all that kind of stuff, and especially animal foods, especially meat, dairy, eggs, honey, etc., etc. So we need to realize that. And we need to realize once we get to that perfect world, whatever you want to call it, Eden, the Garden of Eden, you want to call it utopia, you want to call it paradise, whatever. Once we get there, which may not be for a very long time, but once we get there or slowly get there, more and more people start living that way in small knit communities out in nature, living more naturally and more freely. Then we'll start to totally view the world in a different way, in a totally different way, where we'll see all these things, adoption, contraceptives, all that kind of stuff, we'll see in a totally new light. We'll be so extremely healthy or becoming healthier and healthier every day that we'll start to be totally healthy, that um, we'll start to, our bodies will start to adjust to everything around us. So if anything were to attack us, whatever it is, whatever disease, um, it would not affect us because our immune systems are very strong, or our immune system would become stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's the thing. Once we start to consume raw foods, or at least consuming um, foods with very, very little to no processing, very, very high raw quantity of foods, so uncooked, unprocessed, unfermented, unheated food, then we start to realize that our bodies are perfect machines. Our bodies can protect us from almost anything in that case. But of course, we're not going to get to that level for a very long time, but we can strive to start slowly walking to that place that we want to be in. So the whole idea about this whole topic um, is actually featured in the forum that we have, World Vegan Community, at peaceful-village.com/forum. So basically, when you go to food, diet, lifestyle, and education section of the forum, you'll see, oh, sorry, no, not that one. Human beings section of the forum, you'll see there's one called contraception, vasectomy, tubal ligation, childbearing, and adoption. And that there is where this video is going to be posted. And also to realize that this video ultimately is really getting people to see the total opposite side of this. Now, I just kind of turned your world all upside down. Now, you have to gather all this information, or at least maybe listen to it a few times, and you have to decide for yourself what you think is right for you, bearing children or not, and also walking slowly away from our society, our culture, and building, joining, or creating an alternative veganic homesteading community in nature. And also exercising all the birthright, all our birthrights, as explained in many of my other videos, but also on the forum there under basic human birthrights. So I thank you so much for joining us here and joining me here. Please like this video if you like it, share it around all your friends and family if you find it useful, or anybody else that would find it useful. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and to click on the bell icon to receive notifications through your email. And also don't forget to subscribe to my email newsletter and get my books as well, because they go into detail as well. So thanks for joining me, everybody, and thank you for your patience. This video has been a really long one, but I think it's very important that people understand the details of this and go into it. I mean, listen to this a few times and really I try to understand what I'm trying to say here, because it's very, very difficult to actually talk about this, and this whole issue is, you could write a whole book about this. So that's the thing. And it's almost 50 minutes, this video. Wow. Okay, I'll leave you here. Thanks for joining me. I'm Michael Anfield.